The sound of metal slamming shut echoed through the empty hallway of Lincoln Valley High School, followed by muffled pounding from inside locker 247. What the four seniors who walked away laughing didn't know was that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The quiet transfer student they'd just imprisoned wasn't just any ordinary kid. He was about to unleash a level of strategic brilliance that would turn their entire world upside down and expose secrets they never thought would see the light of day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Lincoln Valley High School cast harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floors as 17-year-old Alex Chen stepped through the main entrance for the first time. His worn sneakers squeaked against the polished surface, and he clutched a manila folder containing his class schedule, locker combination, and the fresh start his family desperately hoped this move would provide. The smell of industrial disinfectant, mixed with teenage anxiety, filled his nostrils as he navigated through clusters of students who had known each other since kindergarten. Alex had perfected the art of being invisible. After moving 6 times in 4 years due to his father's military deployments, he understood that survival meant blending into the background until you could assess the social landscape. His black hair fell slightly over his dark eyes, and his simple gray hoodie and jeans were deliberately unremarkable. What wasn't visible was the brilliant mind hidden behind his quiet demeanor, or the extensive knowledge of computer systems he'd acquired during long nights spent alone while his parents worked demanding schedules. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, had given him the standard new student orientation that morning. She'd smiled warmly while explaining the school's zero-tolerance policy for bullying, pointing out the location of the library, cafeteria, and main office. What she hadn't mentioned, and what Alex quickly observed, was the invisible hierarchy that governed every interaction in the hallways. Students moved in carefully defined groups, their body language speaking volumes about who held power and who scrambled to avoid notice. Alex's first class was advanced physics with Mr. Rodriguez, an energetic teacher in his 30s who genuinely seemed to care about his subject matter. The classroom was filled with lab equipment and motivational posters about scientific discovery. Alex slipped into a seat near the back, hoping to observe without drawing attention. The lesson on electromagnetic fields was elementary to him, but he took careful notes anyway, more interested in studying his classmates than the material he'd already mastered through online courses. It was during the transition between first and second period that Alex first encountered the 4 seniors who would soon regret ever laying eyes on him. The hallway traffic moved in predictable patterns, with younger students instinctively moving aside for upperclassmen. Alex was checking his schedule when he felt a deliberate shoulder check that sent his folder flying, papers scattering across the floor. Standing over him was Jake Morrison, a 6-foot-tall linebacker with sandy brown hair and the kind of confident smirk that came from never facing real consequences. His Letterman jacket bore patches from 3 different sports, and his steel gray eyes held the calculating look of someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation. Beside him stood his 3 constant companions, each playing their role in the hierarchy they'd established. Tyler Beck was shorter but stockier, with red hair and freckles that might have made him look innocent if not for the cruel twist of his mouth. He served as Jake's enforcer, the one who delivered the physical intimidation when psychological pressure wasn't enough. His backpack was covered in band patches and gaming stickers, a misleading display that hid his role as the group's digital harassment specialist. Connor Walsh presented the most dangerous combination of all: intelligence without empathy. Tall and lean with perfectly styled blonde hair, he maintained a 3.8 GPA while orchestrating social destruction with surgical precision. His father was a prominent local attorney, which had taught Connor exactly how to inflict maximum damage while staying just within legal boundaries. He wore expensive clothes with casual indifference and spoke with the polished vocabulary of someone destined for an Ivy League education. The 4th member of their group was Danny Silva, whose olive complexion and athletic build made him popular, with many female students who didn't see the darkness underneath his charming exterior. He specialized in gathering intelligence, using his natural charisma to extract information that the group later weaponized against their targets. His warm brown eyes and easy smile were tools he wielded as effectively as any weapon. Jake looked down at Alex with theatrical concern. "Sorry about that, new guy. These hallways can be pretty dangerous if you don't know how to navigate them properly." His tone carried just enough fake sincerity to maintain plausible deniability if any teachers were listening. Tyler and Danny chuckled while Connor observed with the detached interest of a scientist studying an insect. Alex said nothing as he gathered his scattered papers, recognizing the opening gambit of a well-practiced routine. He'd seen variations of this scene in every school he'd attended, though rarely executed with such polished coordination. The four seniors were clearly accustomed to their intimidation tactics working immediately, establishing dominance through this initial encounter. "He doesn't talk much, does he?" Tyler commented, his voice carrying across the hallway with deliberate volume. Several younger students had stopped to watch, recognizing the signs of a new victim being selected. Their faces showed a mixture of sympathy and relief that they weren't the ones in Alex's position. Connor stepped closer, his expensive cologne failing to mask the underlying scent of cruelty. Maybe he's just shy. Some people need a little encouragement to find their voice. His words were carefully chosen, loaded with implications that only Alex and the group fully understood. This wasn't random teenage behavior, but a calculated assessment of a potential target. Alex finished collecting his papers and stood slowly, meeting each of their gazes with steady brown eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. In that moment of silence, he made a decision that would prove to be the most significant mistake Jake Morrison and his friends would ever encounter. He chose not to respond with fear or anger, but with the patient calculation of someone who understood that information was the most powerful weapon of all. "I'll keep that in mind," Alex said quietly, his voice betraying none of the rapid analysis, taking place behind his calm exterior. He was already noting details that would prove crucial later. Jake's class ring bore the inscription, "State Champions 2023. Tyler's phone case had a distinctive crack across the upper right corner. Connor's expensive watch was engraved with initials that didn't match his name. And Danny's seemingly casual conversation with a nearby group of girls was actually a practiced intelligence gathering operation. The bell rang, signaling the end of passing period, and the four seniors moved on with the satisfied air of predators who had successfully marked their territory. Alex proceeded to his second class, AP Computer Science with Ms. Franklin, but his mind was no longer focused on academics. Instead, he was beginning to formulate a strategy that would transform him from victim to victor in ways his new enemies couldn't possibly imagine. Ms. Franklin's classroom was Alex's first glimpse of sanctuary at Lincoln Valley High. The walls were covered with posters celebrating technological innovation, and rows of high-end computers hummed quietly in the climate-controlled environment. The teacher herself was a woman in her 40s with short-cropped gray hair and intelligent blue eyes that immediately recognized Alex's potential when he introduced himself.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Class, we have a new student joining us today. Alex Chen, please tell us a bit about your background in computer science. Ms. Franklin's request was genuine rather than the perfunctory introduction most teachers offered. Alex could sense that this classroom operated on different principles than the social jungle outside. "I've been programming since I was 12, Alex replied simply, mostly self-taught through online resources and open-source projects. He deliberately understated his abilities, having learned that revealing too much too quickly often created more problems than it solved. What he didn't mention was his extensive knowledge of network security, his ability to navigate both the surface web and darker corners of the internet. or his understanding of digital forensics that rivaled that of professional investigators. The class was working on a project involving database management, a topic Alex could have taught himself. Instead, he used the time to observe his classmates and begin mapping the digital landscape of Lincoln Valley High. Within minutes, he had identified the school's Wi-Fi network structure, noted the security protocols in place, and begun mentally cataloging potential entry points that might prove useful later. Sarah Kim, a junior with long black hair and wire-rimmed glasses, leaned over from the adjacent workstation. "Are you really new? Or are you some kind of computer genius they brought in to make the rest of us look bad?" Her question was posed with genuine curiosity rather than hostility, and Alex recognized a potential ally in the careful way she phrased her inquiry. "Just someone who spends too much time online," Alex replied with a slight smile that was the first genuine expression he'd shown all day. Sarah's programming skills were clearly above average for a high school student, and her approach to problem-solving suggested someone who thought systematically rather than simply following instructions. "Well, if you need someone to show you around or explain the unwritten rules of this place, let me know," Sarah offered. "Lincoln Valley can be pretty intense if you don't know how things work." Her warning carried undertones that suggested she was aware of the social dynamics Alex had already encountered. The remainder of computer science class passed peacefully, with Alex demonstrating just enough competence to avoid unwanted attention, while secretly appreciating the intellectual stimulation of working with properly configured systems. Ms. Franklin noticed his natural aptitude, but respected his apparent desire to remain low-key, making a mental note to check on him privately later in the week. Third period brought American history with Mr. Thompson, a veteran teacher whose classroom management style had been perfected over 3 decades of dealing with teenagers. The subject matter held little challenge for Alex, who had developed a comprehensive understanding of historical patterns through extensive reading during his family's frequent relocations. However, the class provided an excellent opportunity to observe the broader social ecosystem of Lincoln Valley High. Jake Morrison sat 2 rows ahead of Alex, his massive frame dominating the standard-sized desk as he maintained a running commentary with nearby classmates. His behavior in the academic setting revealed important information about his personality and priorities. While clearly intelligent enough to maintain passing grades, Jake showed little genuine interest in learning, treating classroom time as an opportunity for social positioning rather than intellectual growth. Mr. Thompson was discussing the causes of World War I when Jake made a comment about weak countries getting what they deserved, a statement that revealed both his mindset and his complete misunderstanding of historical complexity. Alex noted the way other students responded to Jake's pronouncements, either agreeing enthusiastically or remaining carefully silent. The power structure was reinforced even in academic discussions, with intellectual intimidation serving as another tool of control. Connor Walsh, also present in the history class, demonstrated a more sophisticated approach to classroom dominance. His contributions to discussions were articulate and well-informed, but delivered with subtle condescension toward classmates who offered different perspectives. He had perfected the art of appearing academically engaged while actually undermining the confidence of other students through intellectual bullying. When Mr. Thompson asked for analysis of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Connor delivered a perfectly crafted response that showcased his knowledge while subtly mocking a classmate's earlier comment about the complexity of European alliances. His technique was so polished that the teacher praised his insight without recognizing the social damage being inflicted. Alex observed these dynamics with the detached fascination of an anthropologist studying a hostile tribe. Each interaction provided valuable intelligence about how his new enemies operated, their strengths and weaknesses, and the systems that supported their dominance. He was particularly interested in Connor's intellectual arrogance, recognizing it as a vulnerability that could potentially be exploited. The lunch period at Lincoln Valley High revealed the school's social hierarchy in its most concentrated form. The cafeteria was divided into clearly defined territories, with each table representing a different social stratum. Athletes dominated the center areas, academic achievers clustered near the windows, and various subgroups occupied their traditional spaces around the periphery. Alex purchased a simple sandwich and found a seat at an empty table, using the vantage point to study the complex social geography. Jake Morrison's table was positioned strategically to overlook the entire cafeteria, allowing him and his friends to monitor the movements of other students while projecting their own dominance. The four seniors held court with an ever-changing audience of underclassmen seeking approval or protection. Alex watched as they dispensed social judgment with casual cruelty, their approval or disapproval capable of determining a student's entire high school experience. Tyler Beck was demonstrating his digital harassment skills, showing his phone screen to the group while they laughed at content Alex couldn't see from his distance. The reaction of nearby students suggested they were viewing something humiliating about a fellow classmate, another example of how technology served as a weapon in their arsenal of intimidation. Danny Silva's role as intelligence gatherer was clearly visible as he moved between tables, engaging in seemingly casual conversations that were actually reconnaissance missions. Alex watched him extract information about upcoming parties, family, problems, academic struggles, and romantic interests with the skill of a professional interrogator. Each piece of data would be filed away for potential use in future campaigns of psychological warfare. Connor Walsh remained at the main table but maintained awareness of the entire room through subtle observation and the information network Danny was constantly feeding back to the group. His ability to track multiple social situations simultaneously, while appearing casually engaged in conversation, revealed a level of strategic thinking that impressed Alex despite his growing contempt for how those skills were being used. The arrival of a clearly distressed sophomore girl at Jake's table provided Alex with a real-time demonstration of how the group operated. The girl, whose name Alex later learned was Emma Rodriguez, had apparently been selected as their latest victim. Her crime was unclear, but their systematic approach to her humiliation was methodical and devastating. Jake's initial approach was almost gentle, asking Emma to sit down and explain what was bothering her. His tone suggested concern and friendship, drawing her into a false sense of security before the trap was sprung. Tyler began recording with his phone while pretending to check messages, capturing Emma's emotional vulnerability for later use. Connor asked pointed questions designed to elicit embarrassing admissions, each query building on the last to create a comprehensive psychological profile. Danny's role was to ensure that other students witnessed the interaction without appearing, to do so deliberately. He guided conversation to increase the audience while maintaining the illusion that this was a private, supportive discussion. Within minutes, Emma had been manipulated into revealing personal information that would undoubtedly be weaponized against her in the coming days. Alex felt a familiar surge of anger as he watched the performance unfold. He had witnessed similar scenes throughout his academic career, had sometimes been the target himself, but had never possessed the tools necessary to intervene effectively. This time was different. This time, he had capabilities that Jake Morrison and his friends couldn't possibly comprehend, and he was beginning to understand exactly how those capabilities might be deployed. The afternoon classes passed in a blur of standard academic content, punctuated by increasingly aggressive testing from his new enemies. During biology, Tyler Beck deliberately knocked Alex's textbook to the floor while walking past his lab station. In algebra, Danny Silva spread a rumor that Alex had been expelled from his previous school for cheating, a lie that quickly circulated through the mathematical network of student gossip. Connor Walsh's approach was more sophisticated, engaging Alex in what appeared to be friendly academic discussion while actually probing for psychological weaknesses. His questions about Alex's family situation, previous schools, and adjustment difficulties were skillfully disguised as genuine interest, but Alex recognized the interrogation techniques behind the polished delivery. By the end of the school day, Alex had been thoroughly evaluated and apparently deemed suitable for the kind of systematic harassment that had driven other students to transfer, drop out, or worse. The four seniors had efficiently gathered intelligence about his social isolation, lack of local connections, and apparent vulnerability. What they failed to recognize was that they had also provided Alex with extensive information about their own methods, personalities, and potential weaknesses. The final bell rang at 3:15, and students began the familiar ritual of gathering belongings and heading for buses, cars, or after-school activities. Alex moved deliberately slowly, allowing most of the crowd to disperse before making his way to his assigned locker. He had memorized the combination during morning orientation and successfully opened it on the first try, a small victory that felt significant after a day of constant testing. As he organized his textbooks and considered his transportation options, Alex became aware that he was being watched. Jake Morrison and his three companions had positioned themselves strategically throughout the hallway, creating the appearance of casual conversation while actually coordinating their movements. Alex recognized the formation from his study of pack hunting behavior in nature documentaries, a comparison that proved more accurate than he initially realized. The hallway emptied steadily as students departed for their various destinations. Teachers retreated to their classrooms or offices for preparation and grading. Custodial staff began their afternoon cleaning routines in distant sections of the building. Within 10 minutes, the area around Alex's locker had become effectively isolated, exactly the scenario his enemies had been orchestrating. Jake approached first, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet corridor. His expression had shifted from the calculated friendliness he'd maintained in public to something much darker and more genuine. Tyler, Connor, and Danny flanked him at strategic intervals, blocking potential escape routes while maintaining positions that would allow them to claim innocence if interrupted. "Hey there, new guy," Jake said, his voice carrying a tone of false concern that fooled no one present. "We've been thinking about our conversation this morning, and we realized we didn't properly welcome you to Lincoln Valley High. That's pretty rude of us, don't you think?" Alex continued organizing his locker while monitoring the positions of all four seniors through peripheral vision and reflection in the metal surfaces around him. He could have called for help, could have attempted to leave, could have tried various de-escalation techniques he'd learned in previous schools. Instead, he made a choice that would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. "I appreciate the thought," Alex replied calmly, closing his locker and turning to face Jake directly. "But I'm fine with the welcome I've already received." His tone was respectful but firm, neither submissive enough to satisfy their need for dominance nor aggressive enough to justify immediate retaliation. Connor Walsh stepped closer, his expensive cologne now carrying undertones of anticipation rather than mere intimidation. "See? That's where you're wrong. Every new student at Lincoln Valley gets a proper introduction to how things work around here. It's a tradition that goes back years, and we'd hate for you to miss out on that experience." The four seniors moved with practiced coordination, herding Alex away from his locker and toward a less visible section of the hallway. Their movements appeared casual to any observer, but Alex recognized the tactical precision behind their positioning. They had clearly done this before, multiple times, and had refined their approach through experience with previous victims. Tyler Beck produced his phone and began recording, though he held the device in a way that suggested he was simply checking messages. "This is going to be epic," he murmured, his excitement barely contained behind a facade of boredom. The anticipation in his voice revealed how much he enjoyed the psychological aspects of their harassment campaigns. Danny Silva's role remained intelligence and crowd control, positioning himself to monitor approaching footsteps while maintaining the illusion of normal hallway conversation. His charm and social skills made him the perfect early warning system, capable of alerting the group to potential interruptions while maintaining their cover of innocent student interaction. Jake Morrison's approach combined physical intimidation with psychological manipulation, using his size and athletic reputation to create an atmosphere of inevitable confrontation. His experience as a linebacker had taught him to read opponents' body language and exploit moments of weakness, skills that translated effectively to his role as a school bully. "Here's the thing, Alex. Jake continued, using his name with mock familiarity. Lincoln Valley has certain unwritten rules that everyone needs to understand. Think of it as orientation that the counselors don't cover in their official presentations. His explanation carried the tone of reasonable authority, as if he were providing a legitimate educational service. They reached a section of hallway, lined with older lockers that showed signs of minimal recent use. The lighting was slightly dimmer here, and the acoustic properties muffled sound from the main corridors. Alex realized this location had been chosen specifically for its isolation and the privacy it would provide for whatever they had planned. Connor Walsh produced a small key from his pocket, holding it up for Alex to see. One of the many benefits of having connections throughout the school, he explained with obvious pride. Access to spaces that most students never get to experience. The key was clearly designed for the older lockers, suggesting that this wasn't an improvised plan but a well-rehearsed routine. Every new student gets to spend some time in our special orientation chamber, Tyler added, his recording continuing despite his casual demeanor. It's a great opportunity for quiet reflection on your place in the Lincoln Valley community. His words were chosen carefully to sound innocent while carrying obvious threats to anyone who understood the context. Alex assessed his options with the analytical detachment that had served him well in previous crisis situations. He could attempt to fight, but 4 athletic seniors would easily overpower him. He could call for help, but the isolation they'd achieved made immediate rescue. Unlikely, he could try to negotiate, but their body language suggested they were committed to following through with their plan. Instead, Alex made a decision that none of them anticipated. He smiled slightly and nodded toward the locker Connor was preparing to open. "I understand this is your tradition," he said calmly. "How long do new students typically spend in orientation?" The question caught them off guard. Previous victims had begged, threatened, or attempted to escape, but none had ever responded with apparent acceptance. Jake's expression showed confusion, mixed with suspicion, unsure whether Alex was attempting some form of psychological manipulation or simply didn't understand the gravity of his situation. "Until we decide you've learned what you need to know," Jake replied after a moment of uncertainty. His answer was intentionally vague, designed to increase psychological pressure through ambiguity. The truth was that previous victims had been released when their terror became boring, or when the risk of discovery grew too high. Connor opened the locker with theatrical ceremony, revealing an interior that had been modified for their purposes. The hooks and shelving had been removed, creating a cramped but survivable space that would allow them to imprison someone without causing physical injury serious enough to trigger serious criminal charges. The modification represented significant planning and preparation, evidence of how systematic their harassment campaigns had become. "Welcome to Lincoln Valley High," Danny said with mock sincerity as they moved to force Alex into the confined space. "We hope you enjoy your stay in our orientation facility." His words would be carefully chosen to sound like harmless hazing if recorded or reported, while carrying clear threat to their intended victim. Alex allowed himself to be guided into the locker without resistance, a response that further confused his captors. As Connor prepared to close the door, Alex looked directly at each of them and spoke in a voice that remained eerily calm despite his circumstances. "I want you to remember this moment," he said quietly. "Remember exactly what you chose to do and why you chose to do it. Because in about 72 hours, you're going to wish you had made a very different decision." His tone carried no anger, no fear, and no desperation. Instead, it held the quiet confidence of someone stating a simple fact. The 4 seniors exchanged glances, unsure how to interpret Alex's unexpected response. They had expected tears, begging, or angry threats, all of which would have validated their sense of power and control. Instead, Alex's calm prediction carried an undertone that made them uncomfortable without providing any clear reason for concern. Connor slammed the locker door shut with excessive force, the metallic clang echoing through the empty hallway. Tyler's phone captured the moment for their private entertainment, while Danny checked the area to ensure they remained unobserved. Jake tested the door to confirm it was properly secured before the four of them walked away with the satisfied air of predators who had successfully established their dominance. Inside the cramped darkness of Locker 247, Alex began counting seconds and analyzing acoustic patterns from the hallway outside. He wasn't panicking or planning escape attempts. Instead, he was methodically gathering information about the buildings, security systems, staff patrol schedules, and student movement patterns. Every detail would prove useful in the campaign he was already planning. The first phase of their war had ended with his apparent defeat and humiliation. But as Alex settled into the uncomfortable confines of his metal prison, he was already beginning the second phase of a conflict that Jake Morrison and his friends would soon discover they were woefully unprepared to fight. The quiet transfer, student they had just locked away, possessed capabilities that would transform their calculated cruelty into the biggest mistake of their privileged lives. Time moved differently in the confined darkness of the locker. Alex used the forced isolation to conduct a thorough mental review of everything he had observed during his first day at Lincoln Valley High. Every interaction, every overhead conversation, every glimpse of phone screens and computer monitors had provided pieces of a puzzle he was now beginning to assemble into a comprehensive understanding of his enemies and their environment. The acoustic properties of his prison allowed him to track movement throughout the hallway and adjacent areas. Custodial staff passed by twice during the first hour, their footsteps and conversation patterns providing valuable intelligence about evening cleaning schedules. Security guards made rounds every 45 minutes, their radio chatter revealing coordination with the main office and communication protocols Alex would need to understand for his future plans. Most importantly, Alex was able to overhear fragments of conversation as students and staff moved through nearby areas. The gossip network at Lincoln Valley High operated with remarkable efficiency, and news of the new transfer student's disappearance was already beginning to circulate. Some students expressed concern, others shared rumors about his background, and a few mentioned previous incidents involving Jake Morrison's group that suggested this wasn't an isolated occurrence. By the time evening custodial staff discovered him 3 hours later, Alex had accumulated enough information to begin the most comprehensive revenge campaign Lincoln Valley High School had ever witnessed. The maintenance worker who opened the locker was shocked to find a student inside, but Alex's calm demeanor and reasonable explanation about getting locked in accidentally prevented immediate escalation to school administration. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" the concerned janitor asked as Alex emerged from his cramped imprisonment. The man's genuine worry was touching, representing the first entirely positive human interaction Alex had experienced since arriving at the school. "I'm fine, thank you," Alex replied truthfully. "Just a bit stiff from sitting in an awkward position. I appreciate you checking the lockers before leaving." His gratitude was sincere, and he made a mental note to ensure that this kind employee wouldn't be negatively affected by the events that were about to unfold. The custodian, whose name tag identified him as Robert Martinez, helped Alex gather his belongings and walked with him toward the main entrance. "You know, son, if someone did this to you deliberately, you should report it to administration. Principal Stevens takes bullying seriously, and there are procedures in place to protect our students." Alex nodded appreciatively while inwardly recognizing the fundamental limitation of official channels. Robert's suggestion came from genuine concern and faith in institutional authority, but Alex understood that Jake Morrison and his friends had survived multiple administrative investigations through careful planning and influential family connections. Traditional approaches had failed previous victims, which was why more creative solutions would be necessary. "I'll definitely consider that option," Alex assured the janitor as they reached the exit. "Right now, I just want to get home and process what happened." This was entirely truthful. though Alex's processing would involve activities that would surprise both Robert and the four seniors who thought they had successfully established dominance. The bus ride to his family's temporary housing provided Alex with uninterrupted time to begin preliminary research using his smartphone. Lincoln Valley High School's digital footprint was extensive, with official websites, social media accounts, student organizations, and athletic programs all maintaining various levels of online presence. Within the first 30 minutes of searching, Alex had identified dozens of potential entry points for the digital investigation he was planning. More importantly, Jake Morrison and his three companions had left substantial evidence of their activities across multiple platforms. Their social media accounts revealed personality traits, family connections, academic achievements, social circles, and behavioral patterns that would prove invaluable for Alex's purposes. Tyler Beck's gaming profiles showed his online harassment techniques. Connor Walsh's academic competition results revealed his intellectual arrogance and competitive weaknesses, and Danny Silva's dating app presence exposed manipulative relationship patterns. The four seniors had documented years of their harassment campaigns through photos, videos, and posts that they considered safely private or cleverly disguised as innocent content. What they failed to understand was that digital privacy was largely an illusion when faced with someone possessing Alex's technical capabilities and patient determination. By the time Alex reached his family's modest apartment, he had identified enough preliminary targets to begin the first phase of his response. His parents were both working evening shifts, providing him with the solitude necessary for activities that required complete focus and absolute privacy. He set up his laptop at the kitchen table and began the systematic process of gathering intelligence that would fuel the most sophisticated revenge campaign in Lincoln Valley High School's history. Alex's first priority was establishing secure communications and research capabilities that couldn't be traced back to his identity or location. Using techniques he'd learned through years of exploring the darker corners of the internet, he created multiple encrypted accounts and established proxy networks that would make his activities virtually impossible to trace. The technical setup took 2 hours, but the investment in security would prove essential for everything that followed. The second phase involved comprehensive background research on his 4 targets and their families. Public records, news articles, court documents, property ownership, business affiliations, and academic histories all painted detailed pictures of the Morrison, Beck, Walsh, and Silva families. Each household had secrets, vulnerabilities, and potential pressure points that could be exploited if necessary. Jake Morrison's father owned a successful construction company that had been involved in several controversial municipal projects. Public records revealed zoning disputes, environmental violations, and worker safety complaints that suggested business practices that wouldn't bear close scrutiny. Mrs. Morrison served on the school board, a position that created obvious conflicts of interest regarding her son's disciplinary record. Tyler Beck's family situation was more complex, with recent divorce proceedings revealing financial stress and custody disputes that had clearly affected his emotional stability. His mother struggled with prescription medication dependency, while his father had relocated to another state to avoid child support obligations. Tyler's aggressive behavior appeared to be at least partially rooted in domestic chaos that he couldn't control. Connor Walsh came from old money and political connections that had shielded him from consequences throughout his academic career. His father's law firm represented several prominent local families and municipal organizations, creating a network of influence that explained Connor's confidence in his own invulnerability. However, recent financial disclosure documents suggested that the family's wealth was less stable than their public image indicated. Danny Silva's background revealed the most tragic irony of all. His parents were hardworking immigrants who had sacrificed tremendously to provide their son with educational opportunities they had never received. They believed Danny was a model student and responsible young man, completely unaware of his role in systematic harassment campaigns. Their pride in his achievements would make the eventual revelation of his true behavior particularly devastating. As Alex compiled detailed profiles of his targets, he began to understand the psychological motivations behind their group dynamics. Jake needed to dominate others to compensate for his father's emotional abuse and his own academic limitations. Tyler used cruelty to distract from family chaos and his growing awareness that his future prospects were limited. Connor's intellectual arrogance masked deep insecurity about living up to family expectations and maintaining social status. Danny's charm hid desperate attempts to fit in with students from more privileged backgrounds. Understanding their motivations didn't create sympathy for their behavior, but it provided Alex with strategic insights about how to most effectively target their psychological vulnerabilities. Each member of their group had specific fears and insecurities that could be exploited through carefully planned campaigns that would dismantle their confidence and social standing. The technical aspect of Alex's preparation involved identifying and mapping the digital infrastructure that supported Lincoln Valley High School's operations. The school's computer network, communication systems, surveillance equipment, and administrative databases all represented potential tools for his campaign. Within 4 hours of concentrated effort, Alex had identified multiple security vulnerabilities that would allow him to access information and systems that school officials considered secure. Most educational institutions invested minimal resources in cybersecurity, assuming that their data was of little interest to sophisticated attackers. This assumption left them vulnerable to exactly the kind of patient, systematic infiltration that Alex was planning. His goal wasn't to cause random damage or steal personal information for profit, but to gather intelligence and capabilities that would support his much more focused objectives. By 2 a.m., Alex had completed his preliminary research and established the foundation for operations that would begin the following day. He had identified targets, understood their vulnerabilities, established secure communication channels, mapped relevant digital infrastructure, and created detailed plans for initial phases of his response to their aggression. The 4 seniors who had locked him in a locker believed they had successfully intimidated another vulnerable transfer student. What they had actually done was provide a brilliant and determined adversary with the motivation and justification needed to dismantle everything they had built through years of systematic cruelty. Their biggest mistake wasn't underestimating Alex's intelligence or technical capabilities, though both errors would prove costly. Their biggest mistake was assuming that their victims would always remain victims. As Alex finally went to sleep, in the early morning hours, he was already looking forward to the beginning of the school day. Jake Morrison, Tyler Beck, Connor Walsh, and Danny Silva would wake up believing they were still the predators in their carefully constructed ecosystem. They had no idea that the balance of power had already shifted fundamentally, or that the ESTU's quiet transfer student they had dismissed as an easy target was about to demonstrate exactly why that assumption would destroy everything they thought they knew about control, consequence, and the true meaning of power. The war for Lincoln Valley High School was about to begin in earnest, and the 4 seniors who started it were about to discover they had chosen the wrong enemy. Alex walked into Lincoln Valley High the next morning with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards. While Jake Morrison and his crew basked in their perceived victory, they had no idea that their entire world was about to crumble. Alex had spent the night orchestrating the most sophisticated takedown in the school's history, and every piece was now perfectly positioned. The morning began innocently enough. Jake swaggered through the hallways, Tyler smirked at his phone, Connor adjusted his expensive watch, and Danny charmed his way through conversations with unsuspecting classmates. They expected Alex to cower, transfer schools, or break down crying. Instead, he simply attended his classes with an almost serene composure that should have been their first warning. During first period physics, Alex's phone buzzed with the first confirmation. The anonymous email he'd sent to the school board the previous night had been opened and forwarded to Principal Stevens. The email contained meticulously documented, evidence of Jake's father's construction company using substandard materials in the new gymnasium renovation. Public safety records, building permits, and inspection reports told a damning story of corruption that would trigger immediate investigations. Alex had discovered that Jake's mother, as a school board member, had voted to approve her husband's company for the contract, despite clear conflicts of interest. The evidence was irrefutable, sourced entirely from public records that Alex had, simply compiled and presented with devastating clarity. Within hours, local news outlets would pick up the story, and the Morrison family's reputation would be in ruins. But Alex was just getting started. During second-period computer science, Sarah Kim noticed Alex seemed unusually focused on his screen. What she couldn't see was that Alex had gained access to Tyler Beck's social media accounts and gaming profiles. Years of harassment videos, cruel memes targeting specific students, and coordinated cyberbullying campaigns were being systematically downloaded and compiled into a comprehensive portfolio of digital abuse. The truly brilliant part of Alex's strategy was that he didn't need to hack or steal anything. Tyler had been careless with his privacy settings, and his digital footprint was a prosecutor's dream. Alex simply organized the evidence and sent it simultaneously to Principal Stevens, the local police cybercrime unit, and Tyler's divorced parents. The shock of discovering their son's online cruelty would shatter what remained of Tyler's fractured family relationships. Tyler's phone started buzzing incessantly during third period. His father was calling from 2 states away, having received detailed documentation of his son's illegal harassment activities. His mother was simultaneously fielding calls from the police about potential criminal charges. Tyler's face drained of color as he realized his secret online life was being exposed to everyone who mattered. Connor Walsh prided himself on his intellectual superiority and family connections, but Alex had identified the fatal flaw in his armor. Connor's Harvard early admission application had been built on fabricated community service hours and plagiarized essays. Alex had traced Connor's supposedly original scholarship essay to an obscure academic journal from 1987, then cross-referenced his volunteer claims with actual organizational records. The evidence package Alex compiled was meticulous and devastating. Side-by-side comparisons of Connor's work with the original sources, time-stamped records proving his absence during claimed volunteer activities, and documented instances of academic dishonesty going back 3 years. Alex sent this package directly to Harvard's admissions office, the National Honor Society, and every scholarship organization that had awarded Connor recognition. Connor received the first phone call during lunch. Harvard was rescinding his early admission effective immediately. By afternoon, his National Honor Society membership was revoked, and 3 major scholarships worth over $40,000 were being withdrawn. The golden future Connor had built through deception was evaporating in real time. Danny Silva's downfall was perhaps the most poetic. Alex had uncovered Danny's extensive manipulation of female classmates through fake social media profiles and coordinated emotional abuse campaigns. Danny would create false identities to befriend girls, gather intimate personal information, then use that information to humiliate them publicly when they rejected his advances. Alex's masterstroke was creating a comprehensive timeline showing how Danny had systematically targeted vulnerable students dealing with family problems, mental health struggles, and social isolation. The pattern was clear, calculating, and absolutely damning. Alex sent this evidence to every girl Danny had victimized, along with contact information for a support group and resources for reporting digital harassment. Within hours, 15 different families were contacting the school district with formal complaints. Danny's parents, who believed their son was a respectful young man, were confronted with undeniable proof of his predatory behavior. The immigrant family who had sacrificed everything for their son's education watched their dreams crumble as they learned what he had actually become. But Alex saved his most devastating move for the entire group collectively. He had discovered that the four seniors had been recording and sharing their harassment activities through a private group chat filled with videos of students crying, being humiliated, and in some cases, discussing suicide. These recordings, which they thought were safely hidden, became the centerpiece of Alex's final revelation. The videos showed systematic campaigns targeting at least 20 different students over 2 years. Some victims had transferred schools, others had required therapy, and one had been hospitalized after a suicide attempt directly linked to their harassment. Alex compiled everything into a comprehensive presentation and sent it simultaneously to the police, school administration, local news outlets, and the families of every victim. The legal implications were staggering: recording students without consent, cyberbullying with documented harm, and conspiracy to commit harassment added up to serious criminal charges. More importantly, the civil liability for the families was potentially devastating, especially given the clear pattern of institutional knowledge and deliberate indifference. By final period, the four seniors' world had completely collapsed. Jake was called to the office as his parents arrived for emergency meetings with lawyers and school officials. Tyler sat in stunned silence as police officers waited to escort him home for questioning. Connor stared at his phone in disbelief as his entire academic future disappeared. Danny found himself surrounded by angry classmates who finally understood his true nature. The beautiful irony of Alex's revenge was that he had used nothing but the truth. Every piece of evidence was legitimate, every consequence was deserved, and every revelation simply exposed behavior that had been hidden from people who had a right to know. Alex hadn't destroyed these students. He had simply illuminated the destruction they had been causing for years. As the final bell rang, Alex calmly gathered his belongings while chaos erupted around him. News vans were arriving in the parking lot. Parents were storming into administrative offices, and students were buzzing with shock at the revelations. The four students who had seemed untouchable that morning were now facing criminal charges, family disgrace, and social exile. Alex walked out of Lincoln Valley High, knowing he would never be bothered by Jake Morrison and his friends again. In fact, none of them would be returning to school. Jake was facing expulsion and potential jail time. Tyler was being transferred to alternative education. Connor's academic career was destroyed. And Danny was looking at both criminal charges and civil lawsuits. The quiet transfer student they had locked in a locker had systematically dismantled their lives using nothing but patience, intelligence, and their own documented cruelty. Alex's revenge was so complete, so professionally executed, and so thoroughly justified that even their former allies abandoned them. Sarah Kim caught up with Alex in the parking lot, her eyes wide with amazement. "That was you, wasn't it? Everything that happened today?" Alex smiled slightly and adjusted his backpack. "I just believe that actions should have consequences. Sometimes it takes a while for the truth to catch up with people, but it always does eventually." As Alex walked away from Lincoln Valley High, he felt a profound sense of justice fulfilled. The four seniors had spent years believing they were untouchable, that their victims would always remain silent, and that their cruelty would never be fully exposed. They had made the fatal mistake of targeting someone who possessed both the capabilities and the moral conviction to hold them accountable. The locker they had trapped him in became a symbol not of his victimization, but of their ultimate downfall. In trying to imprison him, they had given him the motivation and justification to expose everything they had worked to hide. Their biggest mistake wasn't underestimating Alex's technical skills or determination. Their biggest mistake was believing that victims would always remain victims. Jake Morrison, Tyler Beck, Connor Walsh, and Danny Silva learned too late that some people refuse to be broken, and that intelligence combined with righteous anger can be the most powerful force in any high school ecosystem. They had started a war they never understood, against an opponent they never saw coming, and they had lost more completely than they ever imagined possible. Alex's genius revenge didn't just destroy his tormentors. It freed every student they had victimized and sent a clear message that systematic cruelty would no longer be tolerated at Lincoln Valley High. Sometimes the quiet ones are quiet because they're planning something extraordinary. And sometimes the biggest mistake bullies can make is giving them a reason to stop being quiet. The war was over, justice was served, and Alex Chen had proven that the most devastating weapon against institutional cruelty was simply the truth, professionally organized and strategically deployed. His enemies had provided all the ammunition he needed. He had simply chosen the perfect moment to use it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.